In the second episode, Warren's pretty upset that his mom didn't tell him that she was sick, so he calls her up and confronts her about it, but says, all right, what kind of cancer, how long did they give you? And she says, don't even worry about that. He's getting pressured to hang up because his time's up, and when he does so, the inmate who takes the phone from him says, nobody gives a fuck that your mom has cancer. And that's when Warren beats the ever-loving shit out of him. Now, on the outside, Poppy and Ingram are going for a walk in their neighborhood as Poppy tells Ingram that she'll help him with this dinner party, but in return, she doesn't want to hang out with his mom. That's when the two get pulled over, though, by a police officer. But it's not just any police officer, it's Owen Cave, Warren's father. And he's come because he wants Poppy to stop doing the podcast. He tells her, I listened to what you put out. I just don't understand why you'd want to open that wound up again. But Poppy says, it's because I believe your son's innocent. And Owen kind of shakes his head and says, for years, I thought the same thing, that there was some missing clue out there. But eventually, you just got to accept the fact that it isn't, and he's guilty. He begs her to stop doing the podcast, but she says, I can't do that. I mean, what if I'm right? What if you made a mistake? And Owen looks at her and says, my son deserves to be in prison. You'll look at the evidence and you'll come to the same conclusion because it's the truth. And then he leaves. And the fact that Owen doesn't want Poppy digging further into the case makes Poppy want to dig further into the case. She heads to her podcast office with Noah, where Noah lets her know that Laney has threatened a restraining order if they continue to contact her. Poppy tells her she plans to have Marcus look around on the case, and that is surprising to Noah because Noah was around 20 years ago when Poppy and Marcus broke up the first time, and it wasn't a pretty sight. She's concerned that the guy that made Poppy's knees weak is back in the picture, but Poppy reassures her, that was a long time ago, we're just working together, don't sweat it. Poppy then starts putting pictures up of the people involved, Owen, Laney, but then one of the pictures she puts up is of their Aunt Susan. Poppy mentions the fact that she was at the trial every single day, and she seemed really close to the twins. And that's when Noah points out that Josie never actually gave a statement. Aaron said that she would be too weak, and the police said they had enough information anyway, so she wasn't even needed. So all of this is a good starting off point, and once Noah leaves, Poppy calls up Marcus and asks him if Marcus is familiar with Owen Cave, and he says, yeah, the chief of police for Menlo Park. Poppy mentions how Owen wanted her to back off the case, and she wants to know why. He agrees to it, but in a very, very flirtatious way. He asks, do you need anything else? And Poppy says, yeah, actually. I've been trying to reach Susan or Laney. Neither are getting back to me, and I need one of them to lead me to Josie, because Josie's been missing since she graduated high school. So Marcus heads off to dig in for Poppy. But Laney went to go meet with Melanie. She felt like Melanie was the one that pointed Poppy in her direction in the first place. The two end up trading insults back and forth, with Laney saying, do you really think all the secrets came out in that trial? And Melanie says, do you really think threatening me is going to work? Because it's not. This whole intimidation tactic. And Laney, while she's walking away, says, yeah, it's really cute that you believe that, and takes off. She then goes to her Aunt Susan's place, and unbeknownst to the both of them, Marcus is there waiting for them. And when Susan and Laney leave in the car, Marcus tails them. And while Susan's driving, Laney brings up her sister, because she's really concerned with the fact that Poppy can find her, but Susan reassures her there's no way Poppy could ever locate Josie. And it becomes clear that Laney really has no idea where her sister is. And she's getting more and more upset that Susan won't tell her. And then suddenly the phone rings, and Laney says, is that her? Meaning Josie. And the two end up fighting for the cell phone while Susan's driving and getting into an accident. And it's a really serious accident. One where Susan ends up dying, and Laney ends up going to the hospital. Now, while this was going on, Poppy had no idea about it because she was spending the day with her sisters. Her sisters had pointed out that maybe Josie wants to be left alone because she doesn't want to be bothered about the worst day of her life. But eventually, Poppy turns the conversation to their dad, and that's when both of Poppy's sisters get real quiet. They're not really willing to talk about the situation. Actually going so far as to leave. And part of the reason why they don't want to open up to Poppy about it is because she just got back to the Bay Area 6 months ago. But after they leave, that's when Poppy gets a phone call from Marcus alerting her to the severity of the crash. And Marcus wants to meet up with her because Marcus took Susan's cell phone from the scene of the accident. Poppy's kind of mortified at this behavior and asks him, is the kind of behavior that got you kicked off of the force? But Marcus takes that as an insult, saying, do you want the damn thing or don't you? Because I really thought this was a by any means necessary situation. Marcus gets up and leaves the phone on the bench next to Poppy and says, there's no passcode. That should be enough information in there to help you with your podcast. But I'm telling you right now, you better be right about Warren Cave. So Poppy ends up taking it back to her podcast office, and along with Noah, they start looking through the phone and realize that Josie has changed her hair, moved to New York, is getting married, and has changed her name to Vivian Parr. Now, what they don't know is the fact that she's adopted a British accent. She's portraying herself as a British immigrant who is having visa issues. And we don't know if the guy that she's marrying knows any of this, but it's worth mentioning that the guy that she's marrying has a kid from a previous relationship with his old wife, who ended up dying 6 months after their son was born. So Josie/Vivian is really the only mother that his son has ever known. Josie has literally gotten up, moved across the country, and adopted an entirely different life. So now that she has her phone number, Poppy calls her up and leaves a voicemail saying that she wants to interview her and sending her audio of her latest episode. And in the episode, she points out that usually the police in this type of murder will look at the family. But in this case, they never did that. They never questioned the daughters. And it's really weird how Josie has just vanished out of thin air. But Josie doesn't call Poppy back, so Poppy books a flight to New York. And as she's about to walk out the door, she mentions to Ingram that she's going to go there and track down Josie until she talks. But that's a little bit of a point of contention with Ingram because he had that dinner party planned. And Poppy says just, reschedule it, but he doesn't want to. He says he can't. He gets really angry, saying, you can't just put our lives on hold to go chase a ghost. But hey, the ticket's booked and she's going to go, so she leaves. And after arriving in New York, it doesn't take long to find Josie. She tries to confront her, but Josie flees into the subway. Although she doesn't do a great job of it, Poppy follows her, and eventually Josie just gives in and goes to get coffee with her. And the first thing that Poppy tells her is that her Aunt Susan died. And it's not like Lainey didn't want to tell her. Lainey did. She looked all over her Aunt Susan's house for any contact information for Josie to tell her that Susan died, but she wasn't able to find it. So unfortunately for Josie, she had to find out from Poppy. Poppy then moves into the Warren cave situation and tells Josie she's pretty sure Warren is innocent and Lainey was lying when she said that she saw Warren that night. She asks Josie if there's anything that she can remember from that night, but Josie looks at her and says, this isn't a story to me, it's my life. Or it was. I've moved on, and you're trying to destroy that. Josie then gets up to leave, but Poppy pulls out her Aunt Susan's cell phone and gives it to her, saying, I found it near the scene. I kept it for you. I thought you'd want it. So Josie leaves that night and goes home with the cell phone with a rush of emotions, knowing that her aunt is dead. And she actually ends up calling up Lainey, and this is the first time the two have talked in years. And Lainey begs Josie to come home. And Josie admits that she misses her sister a lot. But Josie tells Lainey, I'm never coming home because you terrify me. And then she hangs up. Now, somebody who is heading home is Poppy. And as she's heading to the airport, she gets a phone call from Marcus letting her know that after he did some digging, he found out that Melanie Cave was having an affair with Chuck Berman. And that changes the game. Because if Owen found out about it, that gives him motive. That could be the entire reason why he didn't want her digging into this case. That also must have been what the secret was that Josie was referring to when she confronted Melanie earlier. And Owen tried to attack this problem at both ends. He headed to San Quentin to visit Warren, and it's the first time he's visited him in quite a while. And he tells him, you can't talk to Poppy anymore. But Warren and Owen don't have the best relationship after Owen testified on the stand in favor of the prosecution. So as you can imagine, Warren isn't too keen to listen to his dad. But Owen threatens him, saying, I can make your life a living hell in here. But that intimidation doesn't work on Warren. He looks at his dad and says, or I could kill you. I mean, they got rid of the gas chamber in here, so life in prison, it's just days. He ends up yelling at his dad, I'll become the thing that you think I am. Because at the end of the day, you know that I'm innocent. But Owen isn't the only one that doesn't want Warren speaking to Poppy. Because at dinner that night, the Aryan Brotherhood comes up to him and says, hey, who is that black woman you were talking to? And Warren says, oh, she's a reporter looking into my case. And the leader says, that it? And Warren says, yeah, that's it. But whether it's the Aryan Brotherhood or Owen Cave's guys on the inside, later that day, somebody comes up behind Warren and shanks him a few times. And Warren is on the ground of the prison, bleeding out, as everybody else is distracted by a prison fight. Thanks for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments hurt my feelings. I work hard on these. If I make a mistake, it happens. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, it'll be up soon. Sharing is caring. Put it on your MySpace page or your away message. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, wherever you listen to podcasts.